It was an ordinary Tuesday morning when my life turned upside down. I had just finished my morning coffee and was scrolling through emails when my phone buzzed with a message. It was from my wife, Clara. The message read, "Your friend was right. You're a loser who didn't even suspect my lover." I stared at the screen, feeling my heart drop into my stomach. I had been suspicious for a while, but to see it laid out so bluntly, so cruelly, was a gut punch I wasn't prepared for. The next message came almost immediately. "I am done with you. I've packed my things and am leaving with him. Don't to bother trying to find me." Clara had always been a bit of a drama queen, but this was a new low, even for her. I couldn't believe she would dump me over a message and run off with some guy I didn't even know existed. But deep down, I had seen the signs. The late-night work meetings, the sudden interest in her appearance, the secretive phone calls. I felt a mix of rage and despair. How could she do this to me, to us? We had no children, but we had built a life together over the last 8 years. Or at least, I thought we had. I couldn't just let this go. I had to know who this guy was, how long it had been going on, and why she thought she could just throw everything away so easily. But more importantly, I wanted revenge. Clara and her lover were going to regret underestimating me. I decided to start by checking her social media. Clara had always been active on Instagram and Facebook, posting pictures of our vacations, dinners, and even mundane daily activities. Recently, though, her posts had become more sporadic and vague. I noticed a few new friends and followers that I didn't recognize. One in particular stood out, a guy named Jake. His profile was full of pictures of himself at the gym, on boats, and with flashy cars. Typical douchebag material. I scrolled through Jake's posts and found several comments from Clara, all flirty and filled with heart emojis. There it was, plain as day. I felt a surge of anger, but also a twisted satisfaction. She had made it easy for me. The next step was to confront her. I knew her well enough to predict where she might have gone. Clara had a friend, Vanessa, who owned a small beach house about an hour away. They often talked about going there for a getaway, and I had a strong feeling that where she had run off to. I grabbed my keys and drove to Vanessa's place. The drive was a blur, my mind racing with thoughts of what I would do when I found them. I arrived at the beach house and saw Clara's car parked outside. My hands clenched into fists as I approached the door. Taking a deep breath, I knocked loudly. Vanessa opened the door, her eyes widening in surprise. "John, what are you doing here?" "I'm here to see Clara," I said, pushing past her. I found Clara in the living room, sitting on the couch with Jake. They both looked up, stunned. Clara quickly stood up, her face a mix of guilt and defiance. "John, you need to leave," she said, trying to sound authoritative but failing miserably. "No, Clara," I replied, my voice low and steady. "You need to explain why you thought you could just throw everything away like it meant nothing." Jake stood up, puffing out his chest like a peacock. "Hey, man, she doesn't owe you anything. She's with me now." I turned to him, my anger bubbling over. "You don't get to talk to me about what she owes. You've been screwing my wife behind my back. Do you really think this is going to end well for either of you?" Clara stepped between us, her eyes flashing. "John, this isn't your business anymore. I've made my choice." Her coldness was the final straw. I took a step back and nodded slowly. "You are right, Clara. You've made your choice. And now, I'm going to make mine." I turned and walked out, my mind already plotting my next move. Clara and Jake thought they could humiliate me and get away with it. They were wrong. This was far from over. Driving back home, my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The pain of betrayal gnawed at me, but so did the urge to make them pay. Clara and Jake had no idea who they were messing with. I wasn't just going to roll over and let them get away with this. Once home, I sat down and began formulating a plan. Revenge wouldn't be easy, but it would be worth it. First, I needed more information about Jake. I spent hours on social media, digging into his life. His posts revealed a lot. He worked at a local car dealership, loved to flaunt his wealth, and was clearly obsessed with his image. I made a mental note of everything I could use against him. My next step was to gather evidence of their affair. Clara and I had shared a computer, and she wasn't exactly tech-savvy. It didn't take long to find emails and messages between her and Jake. They were bold and reckless, discussing their plans and even mocking me. I felt a fresh wave of anger but also satisfaction. This would be perfect leverage. I decided to call in a favor from my old friend Tony. Tony was a private investigator, and if anyone could dig up dirt on Jake, it was him. I explained the situation to Tony and he agreed to help, sympathizing with my plight. He promised to get back to me as soon as he had something. While waiting for Tony's findings, I couldn't help but feel the weight of Clara's betrayal pressing down on me. Nights were the worst, lying in our bed alone, replaying moments in my head, trying to pinpoint where it all went wrong. But wallowing in self-pity wasn't going to help. I needed to stay focused. A few days later, Tony called with good news. He had dug up some interesting information on Jake. It turned out Jake wasn't just a car salesman, he was also involved in some shady dealings, including selling stolen car parts and laundering money. This was the break I needed. Tony suggested we gather concrete evidence of Jake's illegal activities before making any moves. He had connections that could help expose Jake without implicating me directly. I agreed, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. To make things more interesting, I started playing mind games with Clara. I knew she would be checking her messages and emails, so I left little hints that I was on to them. I'd send her cryptic messages like, "Enjoy your time while you can, and the truth always comes out." Her responses varied from panic to anger, but I knew I was getting under her skin. Then, one evening, I received a call from Vanessa. She sounded distressed and conflicted. "John, I don't know if I should be telling you this, but Clara isn't as happy as she pretends to be." I was intrigued. "Go on." She's been crying a lot, saying she made a mistake. She even mentioned that Jake isn't who she thought he was, but she is too proud to admit it to you. I smiled to myself. Thank you, Vanessa. This is exactly what I needed to hear. I knew Clara's pride would keep her from coming back to me, but her doubts and guilt were cracks I could exploit. I decided to stage an encounter. I texted Clara, suggesting we meet at our favorite cafe to discuss the divorce. I knew she would be curious, especially if she thought I was ready to move on. She agreed to meet the next day. I arrived early, choosing a table with a clear view of the entrance. When Clara walked in, she looked tired and conflicted. I stood up, motioning her to sit. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. She nodded, avoiding my eyes. "What do you want to discuss?" "I think we should settle things amicably," I said, leaning forward. "But I need to understand why. Why did you do it, Clara?" She looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. "John, I don't know. I was feeling lost and Jake made me feel special. But now, I realize it was all a mistake." I stayed silent, letting her words sink in. She was starting to unravel, and I needed to keep pushing. "Jake isn't who you think he is," I said quietly. "I've found out some things about him. He's involved in criminal activities. You are in danger being with him." Her eyes widened in shock and fear. "What are you talking about? I have proof, Clara, and I am willing to share it with you if you cooperate. Help me bring him down." She looked torn, her loyalty to Jake wavering. "What do you want me to do?" "Just play along for now," I said. "Keep acting like everything is normal, but report back to me. We need to gather enough evidence to nail him." Clara nodded slowly, realizing the gravity of the situation. "Okay, I'll help. But promise me you will protect me." "I promise," I said, feeling a surge of satisfaction. Clara was back in my control, and Jake's downfall was inevitable. As we parted ways, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. The pieces were falling into place. Clara and Jake had no idea what was coming. This was just the beginning, and I was ready to see it through to the end. Over the next few days, Clara and I maintained a fragile truce. She kept up appearances with Jake, all while feeding me information about his movements and activities. It was a delicate balancing act, but Clara was more than motivated by fear and the desire to escape the mess she had created. Tony, my private investigator friend, was busy too. He had placed surveillance on Jake's house and workplace, gathering footage and recordings. The evidence was piling up, and it wouldn't be long before we could make our move. One evening, Clara texted me, "Jake is meeting someone tonight at the old warehouse on 5th Street. Something big is going down." This was the break we needed. I immediately called Tony, and he arranged for his team to be on site, ready to record everything. As I prepared to head to the warehouse, I felt a mix of excitement and nerves. This was the moment I had been waiting for. Jake had been a thorn in my side for too long, and tonight he would finally get what he deserved. I arrived at the warehouse and parked a safe distance away. Tony's team was already in position, their cameras trained on the building. Through my binoculars, I could see Jake pacing nervously outside, waiting for his contact to arrive. Minutes later, a black SUV pulled up, and a burly man stepped out. He and Jake exchanged a few words before heading inside. I watched as Tony's team followed them, recording every move. This was the moment we would get the evidence to bring Jake down. After what felt like an eternity, Jake and the man emerged, shaking hands. They loaded several crates into the SUV and then the man drove off. Jake returned to his car looking smug and satisfied. Little did he know his entire operation had just been captured on camera. I stayed in my car until Jake drove away, then met up with Tony and his team. "Did you get everything?" I asked, my voice tinged with anticipation. Tony grinned, holding up a small USB drive. "Every last bit. This is enough to put Jake away for a long time." I took the drive, feeling a surge of triumph. "Great work, Tony. I owe you one." Back home, I reviewed the footage, feeling a sense of satisfaction as I watched Jake incriminate himself over and over again. This was exactly what I needed to take him down. Now it was time to involve the authorities. The next morning, I called Clara and arranged to meet her at a nearby park. When she arrived, I handed her a copy of the footage. "Take this to the police," I said. "Tell them everything you know about Jake's activities. This will protect you and help bring him down." Clara looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and regret. "Thank you, John. I am sorry for everything. I just want this nightmare to be over." I nodded, feeling a pang of sympathy despite everything. "Just do the right thing, Clara. It is the only way to make things right." She nodded and left, clutching the USB drive like a lifeline. I watched her go, knowing that the wheels of justice were now in motion. Later that day, I received a call from Clara. "I did it," she said, her voice trembling. "I gave the footage to the police. They said I'll investigate immediately." "Good," I replied. "Now just stay calm and keep your distance from Jake. The police will handle the rest." The following days were tense. I kept a low profile, waiting for news. Clara texted me updates, saying that the police had already questioned her and were closing in on Jake. The anticipation was almost unbearable. Then one evening, Clara called me, her voice filled with urgency. "John, it is happening. The police are at Jake's house. They are arresting him right now." I rushed to my TV and turned on the news. Sure enough, there was Jake, being led out of his house in handcuffs, looking stunned and defeated. The reporter detailed the charges against him: money laundering, selling stolen goods, conspiracy. It was everything I had hoped for and more. As I watched Jake being taken away, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction. Clara had been right to fear him. He was a dangerous man, and now he would pay for his crimes. That night, I received a final message from Clara. "Thank you, John. You saved me from a terrible mistake. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me." I stared at the message for a long time before replying, "Take care of yourself, Clara. I wish you well." As I put my phone down, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The nightmare was over, and I could finally move on with my life. Jake was out of the picture, and Clara was out of my life. It was time to start anew and leave the past behind. But little did I know, the story wasn't quite over yet. There were still loose ends to tie up, and unexpected twists that would test me in ways I couldn't imagine. But for now, I allowed myself to bask in the glow of victory, knowing that I had taken the first steps towards reclaiming my life. A week passed since Jake's arrest, and life began to settle back into a semblance of normalcy. I started focusing on my work, trying to regain some sense of stability. But just as I was beginning to feel like I was moving on, I received an unexpected visit. It was a Saturday morning when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Clara standing there, looking haggard and distressed. My first instinct was to shut the door in her face, but something in her eyes stopped me. "John, can we talk?" she asked, her voice trembling. I hesitated, then stepped aside to let her in. "This better be good, Clara," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. She walked into the living room and sat down on the couch, her hands fidgeting nervously. "I know I don't deserve your kindness, but I need your help," she began, tears welling up in her eyes. "What now?" I asked, crossing my arms. "Jake S. in jail and you are free. What more could you possibly need?" Clara took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "It's not about Jake. It is about his associates. They know I helped the police and now they are after me. I am scared, John. I don't know what to do." The severity of her situation dawned on me. Jake wasn't just a petty criminal, he was part of a larger network, and now Clara had made herself a target. "Why should I help you, Clara?" I asked, my anger simmering beneath the surface. "You betrayed me, lied to me, and ran off with another man. Why should I risk my neck for you?" She looked at me, desperation etched into her features. "Because you are a good person, John. You always were. And I'm so sorry for everything. I made a terrible mistake, and now I'm paying for it. Please, I have nowhere else to turn." Her words cut deep, and despite everything, I couldn't ignore her plea. I took a deep breath, my mind racing with possibilities. "All right, Clara, I'll help you, but this doesn't mean I forgive you." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, John. Thank you so much." I called Tony and explained the situation. He agreed to meet us at a safe location where we could discuss our next steps. We decided on a small diner on the outskirts of town, a place where we wouldn't be easily noticed. Tony arrived shortly after we did, and we sat in a corner booth, discussing our options in hushed tones. "Clara S. in serious trouble," I told Tony. "Jake S. associates are after her, and we need to figure out how to protect her." Tony nodded, his expression serious. "We can get her into a safe house for now, but we need to gather more information on these associates. If they are dangerous, we need to take them down too." Clara looked at Tony, her eyes wide with fear. "What if they find me? What if they hurt me?" "We won't let that happen," Tony assured her. "But you need to cooperate with us completely. No more secrets." She nodded, her fear evident. "I'll do whatever it takes." Tony made a few calls, arranging for Clara to be moved to a secure location. Meanwhile, he and I would start digging into Jake S. network, identifying key players and figuring out how to dismantle their operation. As we left the diner, I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. This was far from over, and the stakes were higher than ever. But I was determined to see it through, not just for Clara S. Sock, but for my own peace of mind. The next few days were a blur of activity. Tony S. team worked tirelessly, uncovering more information about Jake S. associates and their illegal activities. We discovered that they were involved in everything from drug trafficking to money laundering, and their reach extended far beyond our small town. Clara remained in the safe house under constant surveillance. I checked in on her regularly, bringing her updates and making sure she was safe. Despite my lingering resentment, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of concern for her well-being. One evening, as I was reviewing some documents Tony had sent over, I received a frantic call from Clara. "John, they found me. They were outside the safe house." My heart raced as I grabbed my keys and rushed to the location. I called Tony on the way, alerting him to the situation. When I arrived, I saw a group of men loitering near the safe house, their intentions clear. I parked a few blocks away and made my way to the back of the house, using the key Tony had given me to enter quietly. Clara was hiding in the bedroom, her face pale with fear. "John, what are we going to do?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "We need to get you out of here," I said, thinking quickly. "We'll use the back door. Tony S. team will create a distraction." I called Tony, explaining the situation. He agreed to send his team to draw the men away, giving us a chance to escape. Minutes later, we heard the sound of sirens and saw the men scatter, trying to avoid the police. "Now is our chance," I said, grabbing Clara S. hand and leading her out the back door. We moved quickly and quietly, making our way to my car. As we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still in danger. Once we were safely away from the safe house, I pulled over to catch my breath. "We can keep running like this, Clara. We need a permanent solution." She nodded, her eyes filled with fear and gratitude. "I know, John. I'll do whatever it takes to end this." I called Tony again, updating him on our escape. He agreed that we needed to take more drastic measures to ensure Clara S. safety and dismantle Jake S. network once and for all. The following days were intense. Tony S. team gathered more evidence, and we worked with the police to coordinate a series of raids on Jake S. associates. The plan was risky, but it was our best chance to end this once and for all. On the day of the raids, I felt a mix of fear and anticipation. This was it, the final push to bring down the network and secure Clara S. safety. Tony S. team moved in swiftly, catching many of Jake S. associates by surprise. The police arrested several key players, seizing evidence that would help build a solid case against them. As the dust settled, I received a call from Tony. "We got them, John. It's over." I let out a sigh of relief, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "Thank you, Tony. I couldn't have done this without you." "Just doing my job," he replied. "Take care of yourself, John, and take care of Clara." I hung up, turning to Clara, who had been listening to the call. "It is over," I said, feeling a sense of finality. "You're safe now." She burst into tears, hugging me tightly. "Thank you, John. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Just stay out of trouble," I said, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion, and make better choices from now on. As we drove back to town, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the revenge, and now, the resolution. It had been a tumultuous journey, but I had come out stronger on the other side. Clara and I went our separate ways, finally able to close this chapter of our lives. It was time to move forward and rebuild, free from the shadows of the past. But as I looked towards the future, I couldn't shake the feeling that life had more surprises in store. For now, though, I was content to take things one day at a time, grateful for the peace I had fought so hard to achieve. With Jake and his associates behind bars, life began to return to a semblance of normalcy. Clara moved to a new town, far from the chaos and danger she had left behind. I decided it was time to rebuild my own life, focusing on my work and rediscovering the things that made me happy. The first few weeks were challenging. Every now and then, I'd catch myself thinking about the turmoil and betrayal, but I reminded myself that it was all in the past. Slowly, I started to reclaim my peace of mind. One evening, I decided to visit a local bar to unwind. It was a quiet place where I could sit back, have a drink, and maybe strike up a conversation or two. As I walked in, I noticed a familiar face at the bar, Tony. He saw me and waved, motioning for me to join him. "John, good to see you," Tony said, clinking his glass against mine as I sat down. "How's life treating you?" I shrugged, taking a sip of my drink. "It is getting better. Thanks to you, things are finally looking up." Tony smiled, nodding. "Glad to hear it. You deserve some peace after everything you've been through." We chatted for a while, catching up on life. Tony told me about his latest cases, and I filled him in on my plans to get back to work and focus on myself. It felt good to talk to someone who understood what I had gone through. As the evening wore on, Tony leaned in, his expression turning serious. "John, there's something I need to tell you, something that might affect you." My heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" "It's about Jake," Tony said, lowering his voice. "There's been talk that some of his associates are still out there. They are not happy about what happened, and they might be looking for revenge." I felt a chill run down my spine. Just when I thought it was over, the threat of danger loomed again. "What do you suggest I do?" "Stay vigilant," Tony replied. "Keep an eye out for anything suspicious, and don't hesitate to call me if you sense any trouble. We can let our guard down just yet." I nodded, taking in his words. "Thanks, Tony. I'll be careful." As I left the bar that night, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The idea that Jake S. associates might come after me was unsettling, but I knew I had to stay strong and alert. The next few days were tense. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, wary of any unusual activity. I even installed a security system at my house, just in case. One afternoon, I received a call from Clara. Her voice was strained, filled with worry. "John, I think someone's been following me. I'm scared." My heart raced. "Where are you? Are you safe?" "I'm at home, but I don't know how long I can stay here," she said, her voice trembling. Stay put, I instructed. I'll call Tony and we'll figure something out. Just lock all the doors and windows. After hanging up, I immediately called Tony explaining the situation. He promised to send someone to Clara S. location to ensure her safety. I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Clara was in this mess because of Jake, and by extension because of me. That evening, Tony called back with an update. We've got Clara in a secure location. She is safe for now, but we need to figure out who is behind this. Do you have any leads? I asked, feeling a mix of relief and frustration. Not yet, but we are working on it, Tony replied. I'll keep you posted. The following days were a whirlwind of anxiety and vigilance. I made sure to vary my routine, never taking the same route home twice, and kept my phone close at all times. Clara remained in hiding, with Tony's team keeping a close watch on her. One night, as I was sitting in my living room, I heard a noise outside. My heart pounded as I grabbed a baseball bat and cautiously approached the window. Peering through the blinds, I saw a figure lurking near my car. I called Tony, whispering into the phone. There is someone outside my house. Stay inside, Tony instructed. We are on our way. Minutes later, I heard the sound of sirens approaching. The figure outside took off running, but Tony's team was quick to pursue. I watched as they apprehended the intruder, a sense of relief washing over me. Tony knocked on my door shortly after, his expression grim. We got him, but this might just be the beginning. We need to stay alert. Who was it? I asked, my curiosity piqued. One of Jake's low-level associates, Tony replied. He wanted to be much trouble, but there could be others. I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and lingering fear. Thanks, Tony. I don't know what I'd do without you. We're in this together, Tony said, patting my shoulder. We'll get through it. As the days turned into weeks, the tension gradually eased. Tony's team continued to monitor the situation, and I did my best to maintain a sense of normalcy. Clara eventually relocated to a new town, far from the reach of Jake's associates. One evening, as I sat on my porch, reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized how much I had changed. The betrayal, the revenge, and the constant threat had hardened me, but it had also made me stronger. I was no longer the naive man who had been blindsided by his wife's affair. I decided it was time to start living again, to move forward and embrace the future. I enrolled in a gym, took up new hobbies, and even started dating again. It wasn't easy. I decided it was time to start living again, to move forward and embrace the future. I enrolled in a gym, took up new hobbies, and even started dating again. It wasn't easy, but I was determined to rebuild my life and find happiness once more. One afternoon, while I was at the gym, I struck up a conversation with a woman named Emily. She was kind, funny, and had an infectious energy that drew me in. We started meeting up regularly, sharing stories and laughter, and slowly, I began to feel a connection forming. Emily and I grew closer over the following months. She was patient and understanding, never pushing me to talk about my past unless I wanted to. Being with her felt different, simpler, more genuine. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of hope and optimism about the future. One evening, as Emily and I were having dinner at my place, I decided it was time to tell her everything. I needed her to understand the full picture of who I was and what I had been through. She listened intently, her expression one of empathy and support. John, she said softly, reaching across the table to hold my hand. You've been through so much. But look at you now. You've come so far, and I am proud of you. Her words touched me deeply. Thank you, Emily. Your support means the world to me. As our relationship blossomed, the shadows of the past began to fade. Tony kept in touch, assuring me that the threat from Jake's associates had diminished significantly. With each passing day, the weight of the past lifted a little more, allowing me to breathe easier and embrace the present. One weekend, Emily and I decided to take a trip to the mountains. It was a chance to get away from everything, to enjoy nature and each other's company. As we hiked through the scenic trails, I felt a profound sense of peace. The crisp mountain air, the vibrant autumn leaves, and Emily's laughter created a moment of pure contentment. At the peak of the trail, we sat down to rest, taking in the breathtaking view. Emily turned to me, her eyes sparkling. "John, I'm so glad we met. You've brought so much joy into my life." I smiled, feeling the same. "And you've done the same for me, Emily. I can't imagine my life without you." In that moment, I realized just how far I had come. The journey had been painful and tumultuous, but it had led me to a place of healing and new beginnings. I knew there would always be scars, remnants of the past that couldn't be erased, but they no longer defined me. As we descended the mountain, hand in hand, I felt a sense of closure. The chapter with Clara and Jake was firmly behind me, and a new chapter with Emily was just beginning. I was ready to face the future with hope and courage, knowing that whatever came my way, I had the strength to overcome it. In the months that followed, Emily and I continued to build our life together. We moved in together, blending our lives and supporting each other's dreams. I pursued new opportunities at work, and Emily encouraged me every step of the way. On the anniversary of the day I discovered Clara's betrayal, I found myself reflecting on the journey I had been on. It was a day that had once been marked by pain and anger, but now it was a reminder of my resilience and growth. That evening, Emily and I went out to celebrate. As we raised our glasses, I felt a sense of gratitude for the lessons learned, the strength gained, and the love found. "Here's to new beginnings," Emily said, clinking her glass against mine. "And to leaving the past behind," I added, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. As we enjoyed our meal, I realized that life had a way of surprising you, of leading you to places you never expected. The journey had been long and arduous, but it had brought me to a place of peace and happiness. And for the first time in a long time, I was genuinely excited about what the future held. Life with Emily was better than I could have imagined. We found joy in the little things, cooking dinner together, taking weekend getaways, and simply enjoying each other's company. Our bond grew stronger with each passing day, and I started to think about the possibility of a future together. But just as I was beginning to feel truly secure, the past came knocking once again. One evening, as Emily and I were relaxing on the couch, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. I hesitated before opening it, a sense of dread creeping up on me. The message read, "You thought it was over, John. Think again." My heart sank. I showed the message to Emily, and her eyes widened with concern. "Who could it be?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know," I replied, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "But I have a bad feeling about this." I immediately called Tony, explaining the situation. He promised to look into it and advised me to stay vigilant. Over the next few days, Tony's team increased their surveillance, keeping a close eye on any suspicious activity around our home. Emily tried to reassure me, but I could see the worry in her eyes. The peace we had worked so hard to achieve felt fragile, like it could shatter at any moment. One night, as I was closing up the house, I noticed a car parked across the street with its headlights off. It had been there for over an hour. My instincts kicked in, and I called Tony again. There is a car parked outside, I whispered into the phone. "It's been there for a while." "Stay inside and keep the lights off," Tony instructed. "We are on our way." I hung up and turned to Emily. "We need to stay in the back room," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Tony's on his way." We moved to the bedroom, turning off all the lights. Emily clutched my hand, her fear palpable. "What if they try to come in?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They won tea," I assured her, though I wasn't entirely sure. "Tony will handle it." Minutes felt like hours as we waited in silence. Finally, we heard the sound of car doors closing and footsteps approaching. I peered through the blinds and saw Tony and his team surrounding the suspicious car. They questioned the driver, a man who looked startled and defensive. Tony called me shortly after. "It's handled, John. The guy claims he was just waiting for a friend, but we'll keep an eye on him. Stay vigilant." I thanked Tony and hung up, feeling a mix of relief and frustration. This constant vigilance was taking a toll, and I hated that it was affecting Emily as well. Over the next few weeks, there were more unsettling incidents, strange phone calls, shadowy figures lurking near our home, and unsettling messages. Each time, Tony and his team intervened, but the stress was beginning to wear us down. One evening, As Emily and I were having dinner, she looked at me with a mix of determination and fear. John, we can't live like this. We need to find out who's behind this and put an end to it once and for all. I nodded, knowing she was right. We will, Emily. I promise. The next day, Tony and I sat down to devise a plan. We needed to draw out whoever was behind these threats and put an end to their schemes. Tony suggested setting a trap using me as bait to lure them into the open. It's risky, Tony warned, but it might be our best shot at ending this. I agreed, knowing it was the only way to protect Emily and reclaim our peace. We arranged for a public meeting at a nearby park, spreading word that I would be there alone to discuss some important information. On the day of the meeting, Tony's team was positioned strategically around the park, ready to intervene at the first sign of trouble. I sat on a bench, trying to appear calm despite the tension coiled in my stomach. Minutes passed, and I scanned the area, watching for any sign of the threat. Just as I was beginning to think no one would show, a figure approached. It was a man I didn't recognize, but his intent was clear from the cold, menacing look in his eyes. He stopped a few feet away from me, a sinister smile spreading across his face. John, isn't it? You've been causing quite a bit of trouble for my friends. I stood up, facing him squarely. Who are you and what do you want? He chuckled, a sound that sent chills down my spine. I am just here to deliver a message. You can't hide forever and neither can your girlfriend. We will find you. Before I could respond, Tony and his team moved in, surrounding the man and quickly restraining him. I felt a surge of relief as they led him away, but I knew this was just one part of the puzzle. Tony approached me, his expression serious. We'll get him to talk. This might lead us to the rest of them. As the man was taken into custody, I realized the fight wasn't over yet, but with Tony's help, I was more determined than ever to protect Emily and finally put an end to the threats. Back at home, I explained everything to Emily. She listened, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. Do you think this will finally end it? She asked. I hope so, I replied, taking her hand. But no matter what, we'll face it together. In the following days, Tony kept me updated on the interrogation. The man revealed names and locations, providing valuable information that could help dismantle the remaining threat. It was a glimmer of hope in an otherwise dark situation. One evening, as Emily and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The road ahead was still uncertain, but we had come this far together. We had faced every challenge and emerged stronger. Whatever happens, Emily said, resting her head on my shoulder, I am just glad we have each other. I kissed her forehead, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. Me too, Emily. Me too. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I knew there would still be battles to fight and challenges to overcome, but with Emily by my side and Tony watching our backs, I felt ready to face whatever came next. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while I felt hopeful and at peace. The information extracted from the captured man proved invaluable. Tony's team managed to identify several key players in Jake's network and their locations. The police began coordinating with Tony to plan a series of raids aimed at dismantling the entire operation. It was a race against time, and the stakes were higher than ever. Emily and I tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, but the tension was palpable. Every time the phone rang or a car drove by our house slowly, my heart would race. Emily was incredibly supportive, but I could see the strain this was putting on her. We both longed for a life free of fear and uncertainty. One evening, as we were having dinner, Tony called with an update. John, we've got some good news. The raids are set for tomorrow. We've got enough evidence to take down a significant part of Jake's network. That is great news, Tony, I replied, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. What do you need from us? Just stay safe and out of sight, Tony said. We've got this covered. I'll update you as soon as it's over. The next day was one of the longest of my life. Emily and I stayed home, keeping the curtains drawn and the doors locked. Every sound seemed amplified, every shadow a potential threat. We tried to distract ourselves with movies and games, but our minds were elsewhere. As evening approached, my phone buzzed with a message from Tony. It's done. We got them. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Tony says it's over, I told Emily, my voice shaking with relief. They got them. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes and she hugged me tightly. Thank God, she whispered. Thank God it's finally over. We spent the next few days cautiously optimistic, waiting for any sign that the threat was truly gone. Tony reassured us that with the key players behind bars, the network was effectively dismantled. The police were confident that the remaining members would either flee or be too disorganized to pose any real threat. One evening, as we were sitting on the porch, enjoying the peace and quiet, Emily turned to me with a hopeful look in her eyes. John, do you think we can finally move on now? Start building a future together without looking over our shoulders? I nodded, taking her hand in mine. I think we can, Emily. I really do. We've been through so much, but we've come out stronger on the other side. It's time to start living our lives again. With the threat finally behind us, we began making plans for the future. Emily suggested a trip, a chance to get away and truly relax for the first time in what felt like forever. We decided on a beach getaway, a place where we could soak up the sun and leave all our worries behind. The trip was everything we needed and more. We spent our days lounging on the beach, swimming in the ocean, and exploring the local sights. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly at peace. The memories of the past began to fade, replaced by the joy of the present and the promise of the future. One evening, as we watched the sunset over the ocean, I turned to Emily, my heart full of love and gratitude. Emily, there's something I've been wanting to ask you. She looked at me, her eyes filled with anticipation. What is it, John? I took a deep breath, reaching into my pocket to pull out a small velvet box. Emily, will you marry me? Her eyes widened in surprise and joy as she looked at the ring. Oh, John, yes. Yes, I will. I slipped the ring onto her finger, feeling a rush of happiness and relief. We kissed, the setting sun casting a golden glow over us, and in that moment, I knew that despite everything we had been through, we were exactly where we were meant to be. The weeks and months that followed were filled with wedding preparations and plans for our future. We found a beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood, a place where we could start our new life together. Emily continued to be my rock, her love and support guiding me through the final steps of leaving the past behind. On our wedding day, surrounded by friends and family, I felt a sense of peace and fulfillment that I had never known before. As Emily and I exchanged vows, I realized just how far I had come from the betrayal and heartache of the past to the joy and hope of the present. Tony was there, standing by my side as my best man. After the ceremony, he pulled me aside, his eyes filled with pride. You did it, John. You turned your life around. I smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. I couldn't have done it without you, Tony. Thank you for everything. As Emily and I danced our first dance as husband and wife, I looked into her eyes and saw our future, a future filled with love, happiness, and the promise of new beginnings. The past was behind us, and the road ahead was bright and full of possibilities. We were ready to face whatever came our way, together. But as life often does, it had one final surprise in store for us, one that would test our strength and love in ways we never imagined. Months after the wedding, as Emily and I settled into our new home, we received an unexpected visitor. It was a woman named Sarah who claimed to be Jake's ex-girlfriend. She looked anxious and kept glancing over her shoulder as if she were being followed. John, Emily, I need to talk to you, she said, her voice trembling. It's about Jake. There's something you need to know. Emily and I exchanged worried glances, but we invited her in. Sarah sat down and took a deep breath. I know Jake hurt a lot of people, but there's something I need to tell you. Before he was arrested, he hid something very valuable, and now his old associates are looking for it. My heart sank. Just when we thought it was all over, another threat emerged. What did he hide? I asked, my voice tense. A stash of money and documents, Sarah explained. Evidence of his illegal activities, and it's worth a lot. His associates believe you might know where it is, and they want to stop until they find it. Emily's face paled. Why are you telling us this now? Because I'm scared, Sarah admitted. They've been following me, and I think they're close to finding out where the stash is. I need your help to stay safe and make sure this evidence gets to the right people." I felt a mix of anger and determination. Where is it hidden? "In a storage unit under a fake name," Sarah said. "I'll give you the details, but we need to act fast." We agreed to help Sarah, knowing that this was the final piece of the puzzle. Tony was immediately brought into the loop, and we devised a plan to retrieve the stash and hand it over to the authorities. The next day, Tony and his team, along with Sarah, Emily, and I, headed to the storage facility. We moved quickly, retrieving the hidden stash without attracting too much attention. Inside, we found stacks of cash, incriminating documents, and digital records detailing Jake S.'s illegal activities. As we handed everything over to the police, I felt a sense of finality. This was the last loose end, the final piece of evidence that would ensure Jake S.'s network was dismantled for good. Sarah was placed under protection, and we made sure she was safe from any further threats. Emily and I returned home, feeling a sense of relief wash over us. "Do you think it's really over now?" Emily asked, her voice filled with hope. "I think it is," I replied, holding her close. "We've done everything we can. Now it's time to live our lives and look forward to the future." With the final chapter of the saga behind us, Emily and I focused on building our life together. We renovated our new home, filling it with love and laughter. We made new friends, took up new hobbies, and embraced every moment of our new life. Tony remained a close friend, and we often reminisced about the journey we had been on. "You've come a long way, John," he said one evening as we sat on the porch, watching the sunset. "I'm proud of you." "Thanks, Tony," I replied, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you." As the months turned into years, Emily and I faced new challenges and celebrated new milestones. We traveled, explored new places, and even started talking about starting a family. One sunny afternoon, as we were walking through a park, Emily turned to me with a smile. "John, there is something I need to tell you." I looked at her, curiosity piqued. "What is it?" She took my hand and placed it on her belly. "We are going to have a baby." I felt a surge of joy and excitement. "Are you serious? That is amazing, Emily." We hugged, tears of happiness streaming down our faces. In that moment, I realized just how far we had come from the darkness of betrayal and fear to the light of new beginnings and endless possibilities. As we prepared to welcome our child into the world, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, stronger and more united than ever before. The past had tested us, but it had also forged